Hello and welcome to episode 19 of Into the Spotlight. I'm Ryan.
And I'm Morley. Our guest today is a chef who has 12 years of professional cooking experience, some of those years in Michelin star restaurants. He is now working as a private chef and has just started a chocolate company, which I'm really excited to talk about. Without further ado, please welcome Chef Chris Parnell. Hey, Chris, welcome to the show.
Hey, Morley. Thanks. Hey, Ryan. Thanks for having me on the show. Stoked to be
No
here.
problem. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. So for the listeners, I met Chris when I was working a couple summers ago at this amazing place in the Canadian Rockies called Lake O'Hara Lodge, where Chris had worked a few years before me, but the way things worked out, he wasn't working there that summer, but you know, we overlapped a little bit. We had some fun drunken nights together, some manual labor together, you know, all the normal things that builds a relationship quickly. And now he's doing all this private chef work, just started a chocolate company. So Chris, what is the story of how you got to what you're doing now?
Thanks, Morley. Yeah, I mean, it's been kind of a crazy story, I guess, like most stories. But basically, I moved to Canada with my family when I was 7 from the UK, from London, where they were both police officers in central London, and they wanted a better life. And the Calgary Police Service was recruiting from the UK, so they jumped on the bandwagon and hopped over here. So I feel like just having that happen at such a young age kind of gave me this idea that you can kind of just do anything, I guess. If you're allowed to just move countries, you can, my parents were very much like, you can really just do anything. So growing up through high school, I worked in kitchens. I was a dishwasher when I was 13 at a golf club that we lived next to, and kept cooking. And it was time to I was doing the academic route, and it was time to apply to universities, and I was wanting to maybe work for Parks Canada or something in the outdoor industry, university kind of related, biology. And after much thought, I was like, wait a minute, like, could I just keep cooking? Is this allowed? Like, is that a thing? I remember talking to my the student guidance counselor at our school, who was helping all the grade 12s, or grade 11s, I think, even at the time, figure out what they wanted to do. And I was like, I think I want to go to cooking school. And she looked at my grades and my report card and were like, well, you have the grades to go to university. Why the heck would you go to cooking school? It just logically doesn't make sense. I was like, yeah, but fun or passion or, all the above. So,
I like it.
Yeah. My parents were supportive of me becoming a chef, but they really wanted me to go to school and get my red seal as a journeyman cook. So I went that route because of them, and I'm super grateful that they kind of pointed me in that direction, because a lot of cooks just learn from mentors, like a lot of things. But having that red seal ticket has opened up a lot of doors for me now.
So what exactly is that? It's like a cross-board certification, so you can cook in different kitchens and they know you're a certain standard?
Totally. Canada has 52 red seal trades. So electricians, plumbers, hairdressers. There's one for they just call it, I think they just call it culinary arts, but there's also pastry arts. So they divide it into two.
Interesting, huh?
Yeah.
Cool. So you got the red seal, and then from there, how did your professional at that point cooking journey kind of take shape?
Well, it's funny, actually. There's kind of two ways to do your red seal. You can be an apprentice for 3 years, or you can do full-time school for 2 years and then be an apprentice for 1 year. And that's what I did. And I did my apprenticeship hours at Lake O'Hara with Jessica Collins, who was the chef there. So it was kind of and it was a very kind of transformative time in my life, where I was so focused on this high-end kind of the restaurant culture, and the kind of you work really hard and you get paid really bad, but it's worth it because you're more passionate than anybody else. And then when I worked at Lake O'Hara, it's wait a minute, you can work 8 hours, work really hard, get paid pretty well, and have an awesome work-life balance. So it was this is unheard of. Yeah, this is unheard of.
It's a culture shock.
Major culture shock, yeah. So I did 2 years at Lake O'Hara. After I got my red seal there, and I did another year there. which was a great experience. Learned, a lot about cooking. And then I decided it was time to kind of move on. And I had this idea in my mind ever since I was young that no matter what I wanted to do, I wanted to go for the top. Like no matter what it was, if I was going to be a biologist or chef, I wanted to really do it well. There's no point in half-assing anything. So I had this idea in my mind, and in the cooking world, like Michelin stars are, at least they used to be, things are changing a little bit now, but they were anything anybody ever wanted. That was the best of the best was Michelin for sure. So I learned pretty quick that these Michelin restaurants in London and in Europe will hire cooks that have very little experience. A lot of them won't pay you, but there's kind of this just idea that you're going to come and learn.
Oh, wow.
So we don't need to pay you.
Interesting.
It's called doing a stage. It's changing a bit more now where restaurants are wanting to pay cooks because they're working, pretty hard for you in the end. And there's just some changes happening in the industry. But I mean, back in the day in the 80s, 90s and early 2000s in France and Europe, like a lot of restaurants had a lot of cooks that weren't getting paid, but we're learning a lot,
Wow, I never knew that.
No, it sounds like in film production, like, there's the production assistants. They don't necessarily get paid or paid a lot, but they're running around doing the odd jobs with like not necessarily the promise, but like the hope and the maybe expectation of moving up in the system somehow. So it's interesting that in the culinary industry, it's similar that way, or it was.
Yeah, totally. There's definitely a pay your dues mentality. I remember when I graduated I went to SAIT in Calgary, the South Alberta Institute of Technology. They got a great culinary program. And one of my instructors, I remember right towards the end when they were like giving out advice for, new grads, was like, you got to pay your dues. Don't expect to be moving up the ladder within 10 years. Like you got to really just put your time in. Which, if I'm being honest, is something I've now learned is it's an old-fashioned way of thinking. It's a good way to run the chef industry, to have all these young guys coming up, and mentorship is great. But it's a bit extreme,
Yeah, I mean, and it's self-perpetuating in many careers. Like, it's the same way with doctors, right? It's like I had to go through 10 years of training and sleep in broom closets in the hospital. So like, you should do that too, right? Like, if anyone does that, they feel like anyone that comes after them should also have that experience, to like be part of the club. So it's hard to overhaul those systems if they are a little extreme.
Yeah, no, totally. It's and back to the kitchen culture thing. Like, especially I worked in London, so I worked at a restaurant called the Fat Duck, which has 3 Michelin stars. I was 22. I was living in Whistler, working at the Fairmont Chateau Whistler, which was great. I actually lived there for 10 months and worked for them and learned loads. And then I was just on the internet one day, and on the Fat Duck website, there's a spot where you can click to apply. So I did it, and I emailed them, and I sent them my resume. And a couple of weeks later, they said, come back. They said, you should come. We'd love to have you. And because I was a dual citizen, they were able to pay me very poorly, but they paid me, which was great. And I spent a month there. And the Fat Duck has had 3 Michelin stars, I think, for around 15 years. So that was 17 hours a day, 6 days a week.
Wow, 17. So your life was only cooking and sleeping.
Oh yeah. Cooking, sleeping, and resting would be the next. When you're not sleeping, you're just resting. Another form of rest. It was full on, and those guys, like, man, you haven't seen commitment and passion until you've seen those guys. Like, it's absolutely insane. Just that high level of perfection. And Heston Blumenthal, the owner of the Fat Duck, I think he's at 4 restaurants now, but he has another restaurant in London called Dinner by Heston, which I believe is also a 3-star. But these Michelin inspectors, when they inspect these restaurants, I mean, it is extreme. They could maybe get 5 or 6 courses into the meal, and maybe they'll take a teaspoon and maybe they'll place it under their chair, right? And if that teaspoon doesn't get noticed by the end of the dinner service, then the front of house staff has essentially failed in performing a perfect. You would never be a 3-star if something was out of place like that for the whole of the service. You know what I mean?
That's a whole nother level of intensity. I mean, that must have been, that's just shocking to hear about. What was it like when you first started working in that environment? And, like you mentioned, like learning the ropes, and after like having this background learning, like what was that like? Were expectations and reality kind of like come together and clash? What was that like?
To be honest, when I went to Fat Duck, I had done so much research and like 7 or 8 years of dreaming of, and when I was younger, 14, 15, I'd always heard of the Fat Duck. And like in my mind, I just idolized it at this, this, if you can work there, then you can kind of made it. That would be the place. And when I got there, like it was so bizarre, but it was like, wow, like this is exactly what I expected. Everybody has their head down. Nobody's talking unless it's about the work that we're doing. There's no chatter, right? There's no music. There's no swearing. There's no chaos. There's no unorganization. Everything is just running smooth. Every recipe is so exact to the milligram, So if I needed you to make a sauce, if I'm being honest, a lot of the stuff that those guys were doing at Fat Duck, literally anybody could do in terms of actually producing the product, in terms of following the recipe, putting X, Y, and Z in the blender, blending it up and putting it into vacuum bags, because they've done 6 months to 2 years of experimental research to create these recipes that they know are going to be 3 Michelin star level. So if I'm being honest, after the month I was there, they offered me a position to stay on as a commis cook, which is the lowest level above a stage, which is what I was when I first entered. And I thought about it, and like, who would say no to a 3 Michelin star job offer? But everything I loved about cooking wasn't what they were doing there. They were being scientists. They had procedures, and they went through them, and they had results, and those results happened to be really, really tasty. And they had it down to an exact science. I mean, the way a lot of people on earth like to cook and the way that I like to cook is just from my experiences and from my passion and from my love and from not measuring things exactly and doing a bit of this and a bit of that and something that this guy showed you and something that guy showed you and kind of making it come together. So it wasn't for me, but definitely learned a lot working in that environment.
Well, that's interesting that it wasn't disheartening, like, because you said like for all these years you had held them up on this pedestal, and then like you sort of met your idols in a way, and even though it wasn't the way of cooking you loved, you were still able to like kind of be like, okay, I still want to do this, but just in a different setting.
Totally. And it's kind of funny that, hey, like I had idolized it so much, and when I got there, it was everything I expected, but totally just wasn't the right fit. It's like military style in terms of cleanliness, in terms of, just the way they're spatially aware throughout the kitchen. Everything's done in so calm. And now when I cook, even at lodges or when I went back to Lake O'Hara, all that rubbed off, where I never get too stressed and everything's pretty calm. I'm insanely anal about cleanliness just from working in that environment.
Yeah.
It rubs off on you, and you see just a little tiny speck on a counter, and I just can't not wipe it,
Yeah, it's amazing how like I notice this like every year I get older. It's like every job you've worked, you find like artifacts of that in your life. And sometimes I find myself questioning, it's like, oh, well, like maybe I should have stayed in that route then, because it seems I have all these useful skills from it. But I think it's more of a fact of like, no, it's just like you have all these different valuable experiences that sort of like form you throughout your life. And the ability to draw on all those is great. But it doesn't necessarily mean that like you should have just doubled, tripled down on that one thing that had like certain positive characteristics.
Yeah, no, totally. I think that there's a couple of routes that people go in the cooking world. A lot of people will tell you, get a job as a commis cook right at the bottom, stay there for 2 or 3 years, work your way up and learn everything you can. That I think is really, really good advice. Like for anything, for carpentry or anything, get under a good mentor and learn a lot from them. But the way I kind of viewed it was, why not get like, you could either work for one chef for 1 year or for 12 chefs over the course of a year, 1 month each. Which one would you learn more, right? Maybe with the one chef over a year, you'd get way more in depth. But with those 12 chefs over 1 month each, you're going to learn. I mean, it's going to be crazy. You're going to be exposed to a lot of different, opinions and experiences and cooking styles. So not that I did that 1 month, but I really hopped around. I really didn't keep a job for more than 3 or 4 months, because after 3 or 4 months, I felt like if I was on garde manger or whatever section I was on the kitchen, within 3 or 4 months, I really felt like you could learn it thoroughly, and then it was just time to move on. And I wasn't waiting around really for anyone. So
I guess it's a big benefit as well of like the seasonal lodge work. It's like a certain tourist season will only be a few months, right? I mean, unless you have like a year-round lodge that just does it all.
yeah, no, totally. That's really helped. And that was where Lake O'Hare was so beneficial for me, because I would work there for 4 months, and then I would have, 8 months off to travel and work in other places. And that's really helped me kind of be able to start my own business now through having lots of different experiences earlier on, I guess.
Yeah.
And the cool thing about like you going out and having all these different types of experiences and learning from different types of chefs and learning from different types of kitchen settings, that once you got to the college, did you feel that was like you had more freedom to kind of like experiment or be a bit more creative with some of the dishes or different types of workflows, that sort of thing?
Yeah, totally. I do. I think I do. I think I have kind of a unique style, just kind of a mesh of the past experiences. When I cook with a lot of other, really great chefs, you can tell they kind of have a style. As I feel like I'm a little bit more all over the place, which maybe isn't such a good thing. But I mean, I feel like I have no restrictions. So maybe I cook some things better or worse, but I definitely am pretty open to flavors and whatever technique.
Yeah, well, exactly. And you can experiment with different types of like recipes or ingredients, that sort of thing. That must be like once you get to that level of learning, once you have all those experiences, that must be so much fun.
Totally. I would assume it's kind of like Morley, your work, like creating, and a lot of skills are transferable when it comes to making and building.
Yeah, I think, what you said resonates me with like 3 or 4 months of doing a technical skill. You sort of get a sense from it and you know how to do it. Like you obviously in any job, you can optimize and develop relationships and everything else. But I think in a lot of the things I do, it's being able to make connections and figure out like different ways of execution, and being able to draw from like a variety of crafts and skills is really, really beneficial for that. Um, it's one of the reasons, like, I mean, if I wanted to be like a woodworker, I probably wouldn't be a very good woodworker from my current setting, because like I would be a little limited by like space and noise production. But the fact that I just want to like create interesting, original, inventive things, I can sort of like draw on all these different things and like optimize it for my space. And the more various experiences I get, just the better I will be at that. Yeah. I mean, I think that's an interesting segue as well. Like, it sounds like getting a variety of experiences like that, being able to work in a mishmash of styles, would set you up pretty well to work as a private chef. Because I imagine if someone wants to hire you to create this like curated experience in their own home or in, I don't know, some venue that they rented, like they have a vision and you need to be a little malleable. Or, I mean, I don't know, like how much, I mean, that's another question altogether. We can get into that. Like how much of it is your own vision versus their vision. But I imagine that philosophy of being able to kind of be a mishmash and create all these different moods would be very valuable being a private chef.
Yeah, totally. Especially when you get into higher end clients, or even just weddings, or things that have perhaps a larger price tag. Your clients can get, pretty specific on what they want. A kind of random tangent that just came to mind was when we moved from England to Cochrane when I was 7. Of course, you can speak when you're 7, and I had a fully British accent, and my parents have a British accent, and my brother. I mean, when we're all together, you would think I'm adopted just because they're all talking like British people drinking tea, and I'm kind of I get categorized for sure more as a Canadian, and I definitely when people ask where I'm from, I'm for sure going to say Canada. But when I moved here when I was 7, my parents tell the story that I was in school for 3 months, and within 3 months I lost my accent completely. Like it was completely gone. I think through a combination of perhaps teasing and perhaps wanting to fit in a new place, I learned very quickly to adapt. And I learned very quickly that I could adapt to different people. Which now that I'm older, I'm kind of looking back and realizing that I can be super personable and I can chat with a lot of different people about a lot of different things, which I really believe came just from that childhood experience of being in a new place, being a British boy, and all these kids in Cochrane, which is a small conservative town in Alberta, had never really, there wasn't any other immigrants in the school. So it was like, where are you from again? So like you said, with the private chef thing, you really need to adapt to each client. And even I'll show up to the client's house sometimes, having never met them or even talked to them on the phone sometimes. And kind of in that moment, when they open that door, I'm going to decide, okay, like I want to relate and connect with this person on a personal level. So I need to kind of get a good read of them pretty quick here. So if if they're clearly a business owner, maybe I'm going to talk to them a little differently than if they're a cowboy and they're a little bit more relaxed, right? Sometimes they'll offer you a glass of wine or some of their joint or their cigarette or whatever, or sometimes they don't even want to talk to you because you're the cook and you're just here to work. So, which is fine by me too. I'm just appreciate the work. So either way, definitely learn to adapt has been really helpful.
It's interesting learning about how being chameleon and like different sort of settings gives you, you're kind of like adapting to new environments, especially when it comes to private catering, because like those must be so, because I have a friend who used to do private catering and she used to make, lots of money by doing that. And yeah, it's such a different flow, I can imagine, from working in a kitchen setting where you mentioned where you were learning all these experiences. Like you mentioned, it was like a scientific method to the way they're creating. What's it like compared to like doing private catering events? Where is there like a certain expectation, or a menu that you have to follow, or what's that like?
Yeah, it really kind of depends on the client, but I'll typically send out like a sample menu. Well, usually either they'll know exactly what they want, and in their first email, they'll tell you exactly what they want. But they're like, we want fried chicken and Caesar salad. It's our wedding. We know we want that. And I'm like, okay, no problem. We can do that. That makes it actually really easy. But you'll get the other people that email you and say, we don't know what we want. What can you do? And then I'll send them even if you go on my website, it's very broad. It's like barbecue party or charcuterie board or 7-course tasting menu, or like there's just a lot of aspects. And just from having a few different experiences.
It's a very impressive array that you have in terms of portfolio.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I just want to appeal to everybody. And some people, I don't really, what I do, I wouldn't really call it catering, more as personal chef, because I work alone usually. So I'll usually cook for usually up to 20 people would be at a maximum. But if you wanted it to be nice, like around 8 or 10 would be ideal. Because one thing here's the main difference between working at a restaurant and being a private chef is you're not just the chef, you're the chef and the waiter and the sommelier and the marketing team. You're the business owner, you're everything to do with business and everything to do with hospitality. You're every role in one. So I make the food, I plate it up. Sometimes I take off my apron and I bring it over to the table, and I describe the dish and I run back and I get the next course ready. So you got to be pretty, and I have no kind of front of house experience. Like I've obviously been around a lot of servers and understand what makes a good server, but it was really kind of like, how do you pour the wine again? Like, I don't really remember.
That's something we would kind of joke about at O'Hara is like, so like I was on the maintenance team and we had like a medium amount of guest interaction. It's like if they had like a clogged toilet, like we'd be in their living space. So it could be very intimate at times, but like we didn't have like the same personable choreographed interactions as like the servers had, for example. But we had a lot of like bumping into them or needing to sort of like invade their space. But it was always interesting talking to like the kitchen staff there, where it was like they could have zero guest interaction. And it's like, oh wow, like you guys don't, it's just a very, very different experience if you're only working in a kitchen. Like you might never see the people who are eating your food, which I would imagine could be pretty strange. And I might think plays into some of like the traditional animosity between like servers and cooks. Because it's like you have these like two very, very different expectations and you're not seeing the reactions. You're only sort of like hearing them secondhand.
Totally. Man, a good example of that would be when I worked in Whistler at the Fairmont Hotel there. I worked in banquets. That was the department. I'd never worked in banquets before. I'd only ever done small. So we were doing, I'm not kidding you, we were doing 800-person plated dinners. So 3-course plated, and everybody's getting their food within 20 minutes. So you've got a conveyor belt with plates going down, and then all the food, so much organization. Someone's putting down potatoes, someone's putting down carrots, someone's putting down beef. It's going in a hot box, and it's getting wheeled up the kitchen. I just spent 10 hours preparing this, being a part of this team that's created this dinner. And the food literally just goes out the door and down a hallway, and I never see it again. There is no connection to the customer. I don't even know who, like, I'll do you do a 500-person breakfast, and like, I don't even know who the business is, like what company has paid for this. I had no idea, which I'm not a huge fan of. And now I do a lot of, like you said, I worked at Lake O'Hara, but now I work for a lot of different backcountry lodges. And something that is so important is knowing who I'm cooking for. And one of the main reasons I like the backcountry work is because in the winter, it's always skiers. Not that I only like skiers, but it's a type of person. They're in it for the lifestyle. They're fit and healthy. They're generally, pretty easygoing, level-headed people. So I really enjoy cooking for that, just a client that I can connect with immediately because we both like to ski. So that immediately there's a connection there.
Yeah. It kind of,
wow.
I think in some ways it's a callback to what we were talking about earlier with like the traditional Michelin star European restaurants where it's like, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like there's this status quo in cooking of like the chef is not even seen or heard, but just like producing food in the kitchen, and the front of the house is this entirely separate thing. And now we live in a time where it seems like cooking is a lot sexier, and like people want like a relationship with it, and they want to see it, and they want, like, people enjoy cooking, like the open concept kitchen, right? Like that is, it used to be that kitchens were closed off for the servants and the cooks, but now like cooking is a more, I don't know, accepted part of modern life and like a well-rounded individual. So it's interesting that like your career has also kind of spanned the cultural, development of how cooking relates to how people consume it.
No, totally. It's been a change in the industry, and it just makes sense. People want to feel connected, right? People want to feel connected to what they're eating. They want to feel connected for who they're working for and what they're cooking. And even to the extreme, people want to see they want to know not only where they're, who's cooking the food, and even maybe see their face, but where did it come from? What farm is it from? Where did the beef come from? Is it Alberta, or is it from somewhere else? Or, yeah, even more so, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like people are really crave those sort of personal connections now. Like one that's like very evident just from looking at your website and your social media profiles. Like, you get a full sense of like as to who you are and the food that you make and your experiences that you've had. Like it's such an interesting contrast from what you described, Blair. The chef makes a food, it goes out, they never see them. Whereas now it's so much, especially if you're doing being a private chef and doing these personal events, it's so much about like putting yourself out there and saying, this is not just the food I cook, but this is like, how I make it, this is why I do it, this is how it looks or how I make it look. That's really impressive. And just, yeah, like, and that's something that you seem to be like very comfortable with, is like just, tying your identity to your work, to your chef skills.
Yeah. I mean, it's been a huge learning curve to do that side of it. Like Morley, for you, if you were to create all the cool things you make, but didn't document any of it, well, that would change a lot of things. But how would, like, deciding how you want to document what you're doing? So for me, cooking, I've been cooking for a long time. I was off all social media for 4 years, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. I was into it, and then I was off it for 4 years. I thought it was evil. I thought it was the devil. I still kind of have that opinion, but when I rejoined it with my business, when I got back to social media, it wasn't for my personal life. It was purely for business. That was the only way I wanted to treat it. Which you learn quickly. You need to be personal through your business Instagram. Otherwise, you're just another business on there, right? But I've seen it in a completely different light. But yeah, it's a process. Learning, how do I want people to know what I'm doing on the internet, and how do you want to portray that? Brand, I guess, is the word that's tossed around a lot. Personal brand, and building that, and that has just been so new. and I'm still learning. I mean, I'm still new. It's still like the first year or two of doing this, so I'm still like, and I'll like have a post on Instagram where I think about it so much. Like, is this what I want to be portrayed as? My personal brand? Like, is this the kind of clients I want to attract? So, I mean, man, it's exhausting.
It is. And I agree. I do have a similar like love-hate relationship with social media. Like in many aspects of it, like really irk me. And I think it's funny, like even the terms like personal brand, and I'm about to say the word content creator, which I don't really love because it just, it's like the term influencer. It's these things that I'm like technically doing, but I don't want to call myself, just because of like the, like the Logan Paul connotations they have or whatever. But, like it's very powerful when it's done well. And like, I think maybe it's the fact that like there's a lot of it that's not being done well that makes it sort of cringy in some ways. It, like makes you like not really want to associate yourself with like the social media world as a whole. But there are like so many opportunities out there. And like you said before, like how would my work change if I wasn't sharing it? And I've talked about that with some people before. Like I think I'm lucky in that like I enjoy, I like doing things that are unique that might not be like the most, okay, I'm going to step back from that. I don't know what adjective I want to use, but I like doing things that are unique and that might have like a high visual or interesting impact, which tend to work well for sharing because no one wants to see like the same coffee table built 20 times. People want to see something that is like new and inventive and exciting. And that's the sort of thing I'm into. So like, it's a good space to be in the same way that like, if you were just, I don't know, like if you were just like obsessed with milling the best flour in the world and that was what you wanted to do, it's like that might not be the most best thing to develop a personal chef business, that you're marketing through Instagram. Whereas if you're creating like these very visually impactful like charcuterie boards that are tailored to like a mountaintop experience, right? It's like it all kind of like it fits very well into the social media world. So I think that plays into like your relationship with it. I'm sure like before when you kind of signed off of social media, it's like the things that you were doing like didn't really fit into the world, or maybe they did, but maybe you just needed some time away. But if something is very experiential, like that's what people want to see. It's Instagram stories, right? People want to see experiences a lot more than just like, a random picture, at least a lot of the time.
It's interesting hearing both of your perspectives on this because like I do filmmaking as my own creative hobby, but I work in marketing as my day job. So take it from me as someone who works in marketing, seeing what you guys do with social media, it's very, very good. It's very impressive because like you said, like it has to feel personal, it has to feel authentic to you. It's a strange dichotomy, I guess, but the more personal something is for you that you share, the more accessible it is to others because they can, I don't know if it's just subconsciously, but people can see what's authentic and what is not, or when you're trying too hard to be something that you're not. And, people can see that now. I think it's because we're so inundated with so many messages. And like you mentioned, like people who are trying to be influencers rather than someone who's just authentically sharing their work, that sort of thing. So, and it's interesting what you guys said because like I'm not the biggest fan or user of social media for my personal use, but like seeing as they're like working my job, seeing how I could potentially transfer some of those skills into like a current like short film or documentary that I'm working on now and seeing where that could lead to down the line. But who knows? Because I always find like because I don't want to going on and like comparing myself or like wondering like, oh, this person's at this stage and here I am trying to like make something. It's interesting because like Morley makes all these incredible videos, but here I am and spending like weeks and months at a time trying to prepare a documentary. And you're seeing that it's just like, well, am I really advancing if he's put out like 10 or 12 or 20 great videos in this last few months? It's a weird, but I think it's just being able to understand where you're at and just having faith in where you're at and as you're progressing. And just to go on this idea of like the emphasis of the visual and what the visual means, especially for you, Chris, because there's such a heavy significance on having good visuals and presentation, especially for food, like you show on your Instagram, on your website. Just how significant or how much pressure do you feel that there is in like having the right look of the food and being able to share that? Like on your Instagram you have the these nice colorful plates with this nice wooden table backdrop that really pops very well, because I know people, or just friends or people, when they're looking at a website or for a restaurant or something, they're not necessarily going right to the menu or to the reviews. They're like, what does the food look like? Just looking at what the food looks like, not really considering what it is or what it's about. Just what does it look like? So how is that? Like you mentioned, like now you're doing all this marketing yourself. How do you navigate that space?
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny with food because, I mean, you don't eat with your eyes. You don't taste with your eyes. You do eat with your eyes, but you don't taste with your eyes. It has nothing to do with flavor. It has nothing to do with flavor, and it's just it's just product photography. When it boils down to it, like that's exactly what it is.
It's like someone taking the paintbrush with like the McDonald's bun or something.
It's a great case in point in that, and this is a bit of a hot take, is many vegan restaurants. I feel like a lot of their food looks fantastic, but I have been so underwhelmed by a lot of vegan dishes that are just like, oh, the substance is not there. Sorry, go on. I just wanted to insert that.
I mean, and just the reality is that, like, I'm probably going to take a picture of like probably 5% of the amount of food. Well, again, it depends where I'm working. Right now I'm working at backcountry lodges. So I do breakfast, lunch, snack, and dinner for about 20 people every day. Okay, we eat eggs every day. I don't take pictures of those eggs every day and put them on my portfolio and say, look, I can cook eggs for 14 days in a row. It's not really what you want to see. A lot of people eat eggs every day. It's not interesting. But when I do a nice charcuterie platter, that's worthy of a photo. Of course, if you could taste Instagram posts, I would post everything. But you can't taste them. You can only look at them. And oatmeal, it just doesn't look good unless I'm going to spend 20 minutes putting it in the right light and adding some raspberries and a spoon and a fork. But I'm not a food magazine. That's not what I do, right? So I'm not going to post anything that I'm not genuinely cooking for clients or something that they can eat. So yeah, post less.
Yeah, that's a good point. No, I think it also sort of like plays into the like recognizing real sort of aspect of like social media, right? It's like it's so clear when something is a little more like less in the moment, more they spent 2 hours making the Big Mac and the tomato and the sauce and the lettuce all line up really, really, really perfectly.
Yeah. The superficiality of it in a way, it's like you mentioned, like you can't taste it, can't taste it with your eyes. Like something could, be perfectly layered and the colors are bright or they edited the colors to pop out a bit more, but you don't know until you try it. You have to be willing to go out and try different things regardless of, I mean, of course, presentation matters on the plate, of course, but if just because it doesn't have the prettiest Instagram profile doesn't mean, the food's not amazing.
But one of the really funny things about food is that like it's so evocative that I'm sure you don't even necessarily need to take the prettiest picture of a bowl of oatmeal to make someone want to eat the oatmeal, because people have memories from their childhood of like eating oatmeal on a cold day. So if you are able to like convey that emotion through, more overall scenery, maybe less just like the bowl of oatmeal, but then everything else, then there are some like interesting opportunities there to, sell oatmeal a little easier.
Yeah, that's something I'm learning incredibly. Well, I've learned, I think, but now that I've started the dogtooth chocolate, which we can talk about more, but I've just learned quickly that as soon as you associate the chocolate bars with, so I'm living in Golden, right? Big ski town, hiking, climbing, biking. As soon as you associate the chocolate bar brand with skiing or with mountain biking or with rock climbing, it just makes it that much more interesting, right? It's not just a piece of chocolate. It's a piece of chocolate that people take skiing, and that makes it way different. It makes it a different product, really, I think.
Yeah, I think many marketers would agree with you. Okay, so let's dive into that.
Except for the barons of the oatmeal industry who are listening right now.
Those poor guys.
Yeah, let's dive into Dogtooth. So how did that all come about?
Well, when I decided that I wanted to be a personal chef, basically, was when I was bouncing around a few different backcountry lodges, hiking and skiing, and I realized I could do this as a freelance. And I realized that in my off season, I had a lot of time to cook for weddings and that sort of thing. And I saw it as quite lucrative, to be honest, and really enjoy and work that I enjoy doing. So I started, the first thing I really figured out I needed to do was learn about business, because I have no experience in business at all, no knowledge. So podcast, books, website, literally just learn from the ground up, which is amazing these days. You can do everything on your laptop. So I would just learn and study. And one thing I learned quickly was it makes a lot of sense that if you're in customer service, to also have a product. So if you're like if you're giving out massages, that's great. You're only going to get paid when you sell a massage. But if you sell massage oil as well, now all of a sudden, it just makes a lot of sense. So I was thinking of a product that I could, when I go and do a private event, I can be like, hey, also I sell artisan jam. And I'm not kidding. That was kind of what I was genuinely thinking about at the beginning, was preserves, right? So like a fig preserve, artisan, small batch. You can buy them online or you can buy them in person, and that's kind of it. And that's still a cool idea, but the problem I hit there was the jars. The jars are expensive. You got to transport the glass and the lids, and it was just going to be a bit of a process. So anyway, I kind of put that on the back burner, kept doing my personal chefing, but keeping that kind of in the back of my mind. Then I had a friend, an old friend actually, that worked at Lake O'Hara in 2014, Scott Rug. He moved from Ontario to Invermere, which is very close to here. And he was telling me that he had this idea to make chocolate bonbons, which are like small, decorative chocolate truffles, usually painted with a cocoa butter paint. And they're usually like, I don't know, like $30 for 12 or something. Like they're very small, but they're kind of like high end. So I went over to his place in Invermere. We made some. We spent a few nights making some. And I thought, this is really, really cool. They're tasty. Everybody loves chocolate. I love chocolate. Like, I'm a huge fan immediately. So it's a product that I can really stand behind. Came back thinking about it a bit more, and then the same bonbon molds that he had bought, that company makes chocolate bar molds that you can decorate the same way with the cocoa butter paint. And I mean, that was it basically. I was like, bonbons are great. I think chocolate bars are going to be the way to go in this ski town, because you're going to take a chocolate bar skiing, or literally anywhere. Like it has no limits really. So I had always been interested in that. And I think it's just going to be a fun kind of pursuit. I'm way more in it just because I think it's going to be a cool journey. I'm hoping, potentially looking into being a nonprofit, or maybe just being a small business that gives a lot back, but collaborating with local artists and athletes and talent that maybe would want to get some promotion, kind of like you guys are doing through your podcast, but we could maybe fund projects or things like that and be a little bit more for the community rather than just people that sell chocolate bars and get money. Like, that's cool, but it would be just, money's not like a huge issue where I'm living right now, and the job I have, that's fine, but it would be fun just to take on a bit more of a community-based project. So Dogtooth is the name of the mountain range here in Golden, Dogtooth Range. And the climbing gym here is a Dogtooth climbing gym, so I didn't want to totally rip off their name, but I liked the name and it stuck. And then I started making bars, and I didn't really have any business plan or anything. I was like, well, I'll just make an Instagram account and post some photos. So I did that, and then the response was insane. I had like 100 DMs in a week, people literally just sending me a message, hey, where can I buy this? And okay, well, I need to figure out how to do that, and then we'll get you some. So yeah.
And so you had no prior experience making chocolate whatsoever, right?
Zero.
So what was that process like, just diving into it, learning as you went, and just, and all the joy and chaos, I guess, came with it?
So right now, Dogtooth isn't making their own chocolate from cocoa bean. We're buying chocolate product right now we're buying some from Belgium, fair trade, organic chocolate. That's just really high quality. I would love to make our own chocolate, like from the cocoa bean, to the chocolate product. But I'm a little bit back and forth about it, because typically when small businesses do that, they end up with a nice artisan product, and they'll have a lot of that one product. But I'm more interested in the idea of using lots of multiple different kinds of really good chocolate, different brands, different really good product, and then repackaging, and we're also flavoring them and decorating them, kind of under our own umbrella. But even just that process has been like, just, I mean, you just fake it till you make it, right? Like you just
Right.
start doing it, and then when it starts working, I guess you've started to figure it out. So I guess it's working now. And it's like, oh, where can I buy your chocolate? I'm like, oh, are we ready to sell? Okay, yeah. If you're ready to buy, then we're ready to sell. Now I just gotta go learn that, and then I'll come back, and then we can buy the chocolate. Yeah.
Yeah. That's cool that you were able to recognize early on that like you didn't want to zero in on the like making it right from the cocoa beans at the start, because like that was not the mission at the start. I think that's a really easy trap to fall into, to get like really zeroed into the details. I was kind of thinking about this today, and like in some like this sort of like venture I'm thinking about, and like I was visualizing it as like I'm constantly circling and gradually spiraling in, like trying at the first pass not to go super deep into anything so I don't lose sight of, the overall goal, and then gradually like the focus narrows until you've sort of found it.
Totally.
And
That's cool.
yeah. And I think that has like its pros and its cons. Like I know some people, like we were talking about this last week with Kevin, right? Like from day one, he wanted his YouTube channel to look professional. So like he had to dive down the rabbit hole of professional videography. I mean, of course he already had that experience, but like if you can operate on the premise of like incremental improvement, I think it allows you to sort of like not lose sight of the final goal.
Yeah, exactly. Especially considering like he's doing like a photography and videography like online classes, so like it had to really look sharp. There's like an extra pressure of like it has to look exactly perfect 4K. But yeah, no, absolutely, it's always about incremental like advances. And even though you like, that's how I've kind of like fell into like what I was doing. Like I didn't. It's such an interesting learning curve when you go out and you're doing something or directing a short film. You're in school and there's no real guidebook. You just kind of come in, you just like do a shot here, do a shot there. But like it's also more about like problem solving. Okay, this has gone wrong, the light went out, what are we gonna do? This happened with it's funny because it happened with your interview, Morley, when we were doing the documentary for my master's thesis. Like we were supposed to shoot in the certain room on the library campus at Ryerson. Then when we got there, we looked at it in the camera lens. We're like, yeah, this looks like garbage. It's a small confined space. We can't use this. You're about to show up in 20 minutes and we don't really have another space. What do we do? So we just took a few, walked around, found a nice space with like this nice natural light coming on where the sun was. So we put you there, filmed, you arrived, it went off perfectly. It was the best interview we had that day. So, but it's just like, it's understanding kind of like moment to moment and always being willing to like change and adapt when you're in those sort of positions, and knowing how to gradually advance that way.
Yeah.
And I can imagine it's very similar to like, the chocolate business as well.
Totally. And honestly, I don't think that, this chocolate business kind of grew out of me having an interest in business and going the private chef route. I really truly don't believe that this isn't anywhere even close to the beginning of the process for Jogtooth. I don't know if I'm going to run a chocolate business for the next 30 years or whether this is going to just keep evolving and potentially turning into something, different than chocolate. But I think a big takeaway that I've gotten recently, just from my life experiences, has been not looking for something to be passionate about, but just finding, bringing your passion to things that you're doing. Right. So
right.
I used to be so focused on this idea that everybody in the world spent their life looking for their passion. And I was so lucky because I got it when I was 13 and I knew it was cooking. And I was like, man, I'm so lucky. I found my passion. This is something everybody just spends their whole life looking for. Maybe they get it early, maybe they get it late.
Right.
But what I recently learned is that the passion I found wasn't for cooking. It was just this enthusiasm that I can bring to things. So when I go skiing, I just bring my passion to that. I never really had a prior passion for skiing until a couple of years ago when I got work and they wanted me to ski, and I was like, well, I'm gonna enjoy this as much as possible. So a year ago I wasn't passionate about having a chocolate business, but as the process has continued, I've put my passion there, and I think it will just continue to it'll just continue to go on to who knows what. I have no idea. No idea.
Yeah, well, that's wonderful to hear, though, because it's a lot more liberating when you can just put your passion to all these different outlets, and not just on this one, putting all your eggs in one basket, so to speak, where your passion also has to be your career, and there's all that pressure that comes with it. Whereas here you can just have it more widespread, and being able to just enjoy life and bring that passion, like you mentioned, to all these different facets of your life. It's a smart way of going about it.
Yeah, it's been a good journey so far, so we'll see.
Yeah, exactly.
Chris, I had a question. This is something that Eden and I were talking about over dinner one night, because we both really like cooking. It's one of the things that brought us together early on in a relationship. It was actually when we were living in the same building our first year of university, and she was making latkes for Hanukkah, and I walked by her door and I corrected her latke making technique, and I took over from her, which is a great way to start a relationship, to criticize their cooking. And we were trying to figure out, do we have a favorite thing to cook? Do I have a favorite dish to cook? And I found it very difficult to choose one, because it was just a much more difficult question than I expected. So I'll pass the question on to you. Maybe you have a better way of thinking about it. Do you have a favorite thing to cook?
That is probably the number one question that I get asked by my clients and by my guests. It's just such a normal question, and yet I have never prepared an answer. I'm always I always get awkward about it. But the truth is I know. The truth is no, I don't have a favorite thing to cook. I would say I go through phases. So usually when I'm learning something new, I'm really into that thing. So the last year or two, I've been really into making bread, just because learning how to make bread is such a process. And the only way to learn how to make bread and be a bread master would be to make 1,000 loaves of bread. You couldn't just learn in a book. It doesn't work that way, unfortunately. So when people ask me, I'm I'm really into making bread because I'm still trying to figure it out. But at one point it was soup. I was so into making soup and building flavor in a pot. Not that I've mastered that, but I feel I have a pretty good grasp on it. So whatever is challenging me is what I'm the most interested in pursuing, I think.
That's cool. It's a good way of thinking about it. I like that.
Yeah. I was at least it's not oatmeal, so that's a good thing. But but bread's an interesting one, because I follow my grandmother's recipe to a T. But even with her recipe there, I can't nearly make it as good as my mother can, because she has those years of making it. There's this process. I guess there is a method to the madness, like what you mentioned before, where there's a reason why it's in the why it is that way, the way it is. But still striving for it.
Yeah, and recently, I think last winter I did a lodge season, and I was focused on making the food that I wanted to make. And this winter or last summer, I kind of changed my mindset a little bit, and I realized that actually it's my job to make the food that the guests that I'm cooking for want to eat. It actually has nothing to do with me. I'm going to be the communicator from the ingredient to the dish or whatever it is. But the more I think about what the guests want to eat, it only makes the food better, right? It doesn't affect, it doesn't matter what I want to cook. I can put my own unique twist on things and use my character and show them a little style through my food. But yeah, you got to cook what your guests want to eat, bottom line. So at some of the lodges, I think each lodge I go to, I've worked at 6 different backcountry lodges, and each lodge I go to, I adapt the menu based on the clients. So even the moment they get off that helicopter, you can tell, are they some kind of more, rural folk, or are they more city folk? And how can I adapt this menu to kind of be for them, right? Because if I only cook fancy Michelin food for city people, then when the local rural golden people come and they just kind of want, lasagna or shepherd's pie, they'll, they won't appreciate it as much. So,
yeah. It reminds me of the movie Ratatouille, which I'm realizing now is so spot on, right? It's sometimes that country home style dish is just the perfect thing. And it draws back to as well. It's evoking an emotion from someone's childhood.
Yeah.
And I'm sure if someone's coming in famished from a day of hiking and skiing, that's only going to be even more powerful.
Oh man. Yeah. The best way to cook for skiers is just go skiing all day and then come back and think, what do I want? Like I probably want like nachos and beer, or like soup, you know? Like I probably don't want some like fancy cheese and crackers. Although the cheese is really nice and expensive, I just want like orange cheese in my mouth, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, you don't want to have the thing where like you're really hungry and you eat the wrong thing too fast and then you feel even worse. Like you want them to feel correct after they're really hungry and ate a big meal.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah. I think on that's a good point to transition to what we're putting in the spotlight this week. Sound good?
Sounds good to me.
All right. I'll kick it off. Mine has to do directly with cooking. So during the past year, during COVID, we were gifted a subscription to The New Yorker, which has like quickly become like the main thing I read, because it's like you get one issue a week. It's incredibly dense with writing, not in a bad way, but it's chock full of writing. And so like throughout the course of the week, I'll read all these like really fantastic articles. Then the next week, another one comes, and it's like I have just a constant supply of great writing. And the food writing in it especially is very, very good. You know, like the food profiles, the restaurant profiles are amazing. But there is this longer form article in the most recent issue by Nick Baumgarten, and it's called It's No Picnic, it's specifically about the plight of restaurants in New York City during the pandemic. But it's not like a depressing article. It's just a very interesting sort of like retrospective on how dining has evolved throughout the pandemic. And one of the things I really liked about it is like, it had this great comment on how when like outdoor dining was the new norm right at the beginning, everyone was like, it was this novelty and everyone was excited about it. And then as things started to become cold, it started to become this like, are we really going to like sit outside in like freezing weather under this canopy with a propane heater that's too far away for an hour? Oh, I guess we are. Okay. That's what we're doing. And it was a very, I feel like it was a very well-written piece about this like shared experience that we've all had, while also sort of like analyzing, you know, like the changing landscape of these New York institutions that a lot of people thought would be around forever. And, you know, they just adapted. So it's a great article. I know the New Yorker is like a paid subscription, but I'm pretty sure you can still access individual articles online. So I'll link it in the show notes. I would definitely recommend it. It's a good read.
Cool.
What about you, Ryan? What is yours this week?
What is mine this week? So I'm just gonna say the New Yorker is a great article, so I have to check that one out. But I had someone else in mind that was gonna save for mine to the spotlight for this episode. But after everything we've been talking about, like it just got me thinking about like, you know, how food is so personal to us and what it means to us, and it got me thinking of Anthony Bourdain, the American chef who had the shows and the books, and like he was such an interesting personality, and it's tragic what happened with his death, but like he was such an interesting personality because he knew what food meant culturally and how it was such an essential element in bringing people together and sharing experiences. And I really loved his show Parts Unknown that was on CNN. Like, you know, it's not normal that like, you know, when someone's in college and they're spending their Sunday nights watching a food show on CNN, but that's what I was doing some nights because it was so interesting seeing him go to these little corners across America or even beyond in Europe and Canada. He did like 2 episodes, one in Newfoundland and one here in Quebec, which was really interesting. Just being able, he was really interesting using like a documentary style of interviewing interesting people and different types of recipes and going through the history of what the food is and seeing the media and talk about different issues relating to people in all these different places, even like the gritty places that you won't necessarily find that were like, you know, that were 5-star whatever. It was really just an interesting way of understanding what food means culturally and how it's so personal to each and every one of us. I would just check out all of his work, his books, his shows. Nothing like it, and just to remember what food means to us personally.
That's awesome.
Thank you for my TED Talk. No.
Anthony Bourdain, I know it means a lot to a lot of cooks and everyone, but to a lot of cooks. He gave a voice to the restaurant industry that didn't really have a voice, and super important guy for a lot of people.
Awesome.
Yeah, incredible.
So my Into the Spotlight, there's 2 I want to mention. One, I'm sure you know, you must have heard of Tim Ferriss at some point.
Yes.
Yes.
That man, I could not mention him. I listen to his podcast, every podcast that gets released, and I've read all his books. And that guy provides a lot of insight into gives asks a lot of interesting people questions that other people just don't ask. Morning routines, that sort of thing. Has been super transformative, honestly, for me.
I was listening to his most recent episode today, the Tim and Kev.
Oh, nice.
Episode 500.
There you go. That's awesome, man. Yeah, he's a super inspirational guy, and all his writing is just, his blogs and his writing is awesome. And the second one I want to bring into the spotlight, I don't know if you guys know much about the organization Protect Our Winners, POW.
No.
POW, POW. So it's just an organization that is trying to bring the winter sport, basically, community together, skiers, snowmobilers, snowboarders, and just kind of shine a light on our winter. We're losing our winners through climate change, and that people that are active members in the community around here and around Golden, and there's a group in Golden and a group in Revelstoke and beyond, they're really doing a lot and raising a lot of money, and they sell cool shirts and hoodies and sweaters and stuff. And check it out. Protect Our Winners on Google.
Cool.
Awesome.
I will definitely link that in the show notes as well. Sweet. Chris, this has been an absolute pleasure. This was such a cool conversation, and thanks for coming on.
Thanks so much, Morley, Ryan. It has been super fun.
I, of course, will link all your stuff in the show notes, but for the auditorially inclined, you can find Chris at chrisparnell.ca and on Instagram under chef Chris Parnell and dogtooth.chocolate. I think there's a dot in there. Yes, there is. Chris, is there anywhere else you want to direct people, or those are the spots?
Instagram's the spot for me these days. So that's the spot.
Sweet.
Awesome.
Well, thanks once again, and have a great rest of your night.
Yeah, thanks, you guys.
Bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
See ya.